book. You're saying that you do say in the book that your sister had the 6, the books under the bed. I didn't realise it was 6 every week. That's a heck of a lot. Yeah. And I'm sort of thinking that there's where are the role models for the writer? There's obviously you've got this superb teacher. Ken Hetherington's the music teacher, and that's the impetus. That's the drive at this stage in your life, isn't it? It's towards and Latin, music and Latin.
Yeah, music and Latin, because they were the good teachers. I don't think it matters what subject they teach, but if you encounter a fantastic teacher in your life, you're damned lucky, and you will never forget that person, because they give you something that even if your home is wonderfully integrated, even if your home is wonderfully supportive, they give you something home can't give you, which is an external perspective. I don't actually know you from a hole in the wall. I have no moral obligation to love you, but I still think you're good at something. That's extraordinary. That is an extraordinary thing. And Dr. Nisbet, is that a name you know? Oh, she's not still alive, is she? Oh, Dr. Nisbet was wonderful. She was about 4'8", and a very big person indeed, if you know what I mean. Her stature. Those were the days when teachers stood on a podium, with a lectern to teach. And she was Boudica in brogues. She just taught us everything we needed to know about Latin grammar. She was an absolute revelation, because she was the first person to ever teach me that language has rules. Language has rules. And if a verb, an inanimate object, can be forced by virtue of its place in a sentence to mean only one thing, you can decode all sorts of bizarreness and turn it into meaning. The first hope was, one day my sister will make sense. One day I'll be able to work it out. That was harder, much harder than Latin. But the next thing was, and people who have been dead for centuries can speak to you. My God, what kind of a thought is that? That's huge. That's a massive thought. And I can read them for myself. I can read them for myself. That's extraordinary. And what Ken Hetherington, my music teacher, gave me was, it's the other person I nearly read to you about. My music teacher was the person who taught me that no art form, no nothing is the prerogative of one class. He had come from a working class background in the north of England to Scotland. His first posting was in Skye. And he said, there is nothing people like in Skye better than Tchaikovsky, he said authoritatively. How did you find that out? I said, interested. He said, well, I used to play Tchaikovsky every lunchtime because I was trying to come to terms with the symphonies, because I've never liked Tchaikovsky. But I was playing it at lunchtime, and a boy came in. I was hanging about outside, and I said, what are you doing out there, Donald? In you come. And this lad came in, and he used to come every lunchtime to hear the Tchaikovsky, and eventually said to Ken, would it bother you if I had a dance to that? Ken said, no. Feel free. Let it all hang out. And the bloke danced. He ended up, this is Billy Elliot, you know where this is going. He ended up in the Corps de Ballet in Moscow.
Wow.
That's remarkable. Now, if he'd never encountered that man, how would he have known there was anybody called Tchaikovsky until he reached an age where he was maybe turning on Radio 3 for a laugh to see what it was, or by mistake, which is the way most people turn on Radio 3, let's face it. Do you remember when they had a competition at the BBC for what's it called, jingles, to introduce them? And the one that almost won for Radio 3 was Nobody's Listening, Radio 3. That was the one they were going to do for them. It would have taken that lad ages. And he would have ended up being middle-aged, having done something else, thinking, I wonder what it would have been like to dance to that music. And when I heard that story, I thought, well, I wonder, and I mean, what he gave us, I heard countertenors, I heard not just standard repertoire classical music. I knew classical music existed because Liberace used to be in the TV. We have all seen Liberace, and I thought it was for Jessies. The way you do when you see Liberace on the TV. You think it's for people who are very flashy and who like flashy cufflinks and who play simplified versions of Chopin. And then when I found out that Chopin was muscular and terribly masculine, then when I found out that Bach had been a good boy all his life, and he had an orchestra of 15, and he had to write a cantata for every church service. Can you imagine? I'm just churning out this week's cantata. Are you kidding? To turn one out every single week, hand it to the musicians on the day, what it must have sounded like would have been hellish, I would have thought. Everybody playing the wrong thing. The people who played the viola were the people who used to play the French horn until their teeth fell out. And then they would play the horn line. They'd just be handed a viola. They wouldn't have given any lessons. And I suddenly thought, wow, this is people. This is real life. This is not posh people. This is not separate people. This is working people earning a living. The orchestra in Prague was one of the finest orchestras in the world. That was why Mozart put on his operas there. Do you know why the orchestra in Prague was the finest in the world? Because the young men, they had a surplus of young men. And the young men were given the option of national service or playing a musical instrument. Gentlemen, what would you do? A clarinet or a gun? Extraordinarily, a lot of them chose the clarinet, and they had the best orchestra in Europe because you couldn't just join to avoid national service. You had to be good. Otherwise, you would be chucked out and you would end up in the army, because that was the two options for young men. The Swedish army worked on exactly the same basis. If you don't have somebody to tell you that stuff, you can be led into a lot of Daily Mail truths about what life is about, and constantly think classical music has nothing to do with me. I wouldn't like that. That's fancy. I probably couldn't afford to get into a concert for that. I bet you can. I found ways to do it. And if Ken hadn't given me that, what he was giving me was saying, the best in the world is there for you. And not just there for you to enjoy, but there for you to make as well. The thrill of playing the viola line in a Bach Brandenburg concerto, knowing that you're part of that fabulous noise, is second to nothing. Did any of you watch the concert from Stirling? Yes. Do you see those little kids? Yeah. And they're practicing without being told to. Why is that? You hear all this rubbish about children today don't want to learn. Yes, they do, but they want to learn something serious. They don't want media studies. They want something real. Now, that was very callous. Media studies can actually give you a lot at university level, and we need people to be able to classify and analyse that. But when they're little, kids can cope with an awful lot more than we sometimes think. Kids used to go to David Hume went to university at the age of 12. Yeah. His brother went at the age of 10. And what do we give them? Terrible, watered-down stuff. We can't give them Latin, it's too hard. Nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. We can't give them a second or third language. It's nonsense. Please, if you do nothing else after you've been tonight, kick up shit at your local school. We want an orchestra. We want a choir at the very least.